Hi, and welcome to Writer's Ramble. I'm Michael,
And I'm Deanna.
and today we're doing something we haven't done in a minute, Writer's Rants. This is a rant, so it's just things that make our blood boil as writers. So, Marvel, huh?
So, obvious spoiler warning for phases 3 and onwards because we're going to be discussing, different events that happen in the movies and the shows of the MCU.
I don't care for what they've been doing in phases 4 and 5, which phase 4 mainly consists of TV shows and the occasional movie that they had time to make in between making TV shows, none of which are very high quality due to the fact that they valued very suddenly and out of the blue, I feel like, quantity over quality. I'm not going to pretend that Marvel wasn't sort of a more quantity-centric production in the first place. They made so many movies a year already by the time Endgame came out. But they really ramped things up, like, I want to say, like, triple as much as they did before that. And it's just strange that it never occurred to them. I think maybe because they were seeing dollar signs in their eyes.
Or on cocaine.
Just the fact that we might get a little tired of watching, a movie is an hour and a half. Even if they'd made as many movies as they made shows in that time, and they didn't make the shows, I think we still all would have watched them. But watching a TV show is a very different thing. At the very least, you're probably going to be watching 6 to 8 episodes of that TV show if you are watching it. Mm-hmm. And how many have they made now? I want to say like 15.
I don't know, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt it because it really blew up, especially around like the quarantine period. And, luckily we were all home for that. Or, it was lucky for Marvel in that case. But...
Yeah, I was going to say, they probably found that fortuitous.
Yeah.
And kind of banked on it a little bit. However, I mean, I don't think anyone saw that coming. It was just lucky for them.
Conspiracy theory, they made COVID happen. I'm going to do that from now on. Whenever I think of something that seems like a good conspiracy theory, I'll just throw it out there and see if anyone bites.
I mean, everyone knows that Kevin Feige works for the Chinese government.
Obviously. You heard it here, folks.
Spread the truth. So, obviously, quantity versus quality is a topic that is commonly discussed. Art is a strange thing in that artists want to be paid. Weird. But what artists want to make are oftentimes at odds with what is going to sell well. Just look at any artist on the internet in the past 10 years and ask them if they've drawn anything with fur. But I feel like Marvel is a good example here because I think that the general consensus among audiences and critics alike, critics to a lesser extent, as per usual, is that Marvel was pretty good. Like, at the very least, average, if not a little below average on their worst outings, and pretty well above average on their good outings. Anyone who's seen Thor Ragnarok, Infinity War, Endgame, Black Panther, they could tell you.
The good old original Avengers, and I mourn those days.
Yeah, the original Avengers, Iron Man. Anyone who's seen those movies can tell you that there is definitely value in those movies. They were all very good for what they were. And to see the sort of kind of really fast 180 from arguably their best movie, definitely their biggest movie, Endgame, to what happened with the TV shows directly after.
I would argue, and you may feel differently, but I think the last really good Marvel movie was Infinity War. I didn't mind Endgame, but it just wasn't quite the same.
I mean, I'm with you there.
Mm-hmm.
I know that a lot of people like Endgame. It's really better for fan service than it is as an actual movie. I mean, the time travel is pretty convoluted. Infinity War was more interesting. I think it's the real reason that a lot of people watched Endgame.
Well, Infinity War had a great way of building everything up to, the devastating end and ripping out your heart and really leaving you, as you left the movie theater, just, oh no, like Spider-Man and like everyone else, like, what did I see? And, everyone just kind of left almost like, at least I feel like my family, we walked out kind of like zombies, because I mean, it was a long movie, but also it was
It
just
was a very
like,
tragic one.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it just really, I don't know. I kind of liked that pain, I guess. And with Endgame, even though I liked that ultimately, it's good that everyone came back. Well, almost everyone, not quite, but it just, I don't know. There was something about it that just wasn't. It was missing something. I don't know.
Yeah, as a piece of art, I'd say that Infinity War was better, more interesting. I really liked Thanos in Infinity War. I didn't really think he was nearly as interesting in Endgame because he was a kind of complex character, and then in Endgame, he's like canonically from several years prior, and kind of acts more like a traditional villain who's just like attack stuff. I got a big sword.
I will say that some of the shows that we watched we did enjoy. I know that I personally really liked WandaVision and Loki, and now the second season of Loki is out as well. I really wonder when WandaVision will get another one, if it will, but anyways.
Yeah, in terms of the shows that we have watched, it's true that like 2 out of the 3 of them that we did watch, we ended up liking a fair bit. WandaVision, I really appreciated, except for like the very last bit. I feel like they kind of came out the gate swinging, with like a really personal, interesting story that works well for TV, and then it devolved into Marvel stuff at the very end with Agatha, and had to have a big CGI battle at the end because they had a quota to fill, I guess. I think that if Marvel just wanted to not do that, especially with some of their TV shows, which are meant to be more low stakes, like, I think that nobody would mind because, yeah, they're superheroes, but especially with WandaVision, it was like a personal story about grief and loss, and like, why does there have to be a big superhero fight at the end of that?
Mm-hmm. I think it would have been better without it, but I know we've mentioned that before in another video, but yeah, I feel the same way. I think they should have just focused on kind of like the psychology element of it and just her personal, inner demons. And Loki I liked a lot. It's interesting seeing him like actually becoming more of like a good guy and like really starting to root for him, even though he's like a little shithead. But like you're never really totally sure if he's going to actually come around because he's Loki. But in the Loki series, I felt like, oh, maybe he actually is like maturing. Wow, he's capable of that.
But this is writer's rant, and I'm going to say some negative things now.
Okay, I'm sorry. You go ahead, dear.
In terms of Loki, one thing that I think they had to do, or, well, actually, they didn't really have to, but something that the MCU was leaning toward in Phase 4 was the idea of the multiverse. Technically, the first instance of it is in Loki, and so I have beef with it for that reason, because it may not come as a big surprise to you to learn that I think they didn't do the multiverse very well in the MCU. For one thing, they tried making rules regarding the multiverse and like world building regarding the multiverse like 4 different times in 4 different ways, and nobody was talking to each other in production about how they decided the multiverse worked, and it just doesn't feel cohesive the way that it should. For instance, in Loki, they established that there is an organization known as the Time Variance Authority, I believe, and they are kind of like in control of the entire multiverse. They're keeping everything to one timeline, and there's never been any breaches because they always destroy the variance timelines so that there can't be breaches in the multiverse. Well, then, like, not even too long later, they have Doctor Strange, where it's established that there is and has been for quite some time, an indeterminate amount of time. There's been several multiverses, all coexisting perfectly normally, and he goes through several of them, and no mention of the TVA. There's no quelling of any of these timelines. The 2 entities, Loki and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, are just like separate things entirely. They're supposed to be in the same universe. It's called the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So you'd think that they would cohere to. Is that a word?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm the
You'd think that they would work together, but it just seems like they had too many things cooking at once, which goes back to the quality versus quantity. I just don't think they thought through what they were doing, because they didn't have time to think through it. They're like, oh shit, we got 15 shows to make in 2 years. Let's go, go, go. And I don't blame the writers. I don't blame the actors. I especially don't blame the CGI artists for any bad CGI you've probably definitely seen in some of the newer MCU movies. People often point to Thor: Love and Thunder as having certain moments of really, really bad CGI.
I don't remember. Well, we only saw,
we saw
it once. We didn't.
I didn't want to see it more than once.
I just want to say, as someone that had Thor as one of my more favorite superheroes, I was especially very sad with what happened with Thor: Love and Thunder, but I'll save that for a different writer's rant. You just wait.
Yeah, that's going to be probably the next one, honestly. So I don't blame anybody creatively involved. I really mainly blame the people who decided that it was a good idea to have all of these shows all at once, as quickly as humanly possible. I'm honestly surprised and a little impressed at how many they've made, but it certainly didn't turn into good products because of how quickly they cranked them out. And that makes me think of, like, there was some discourse about the use of AI in TV shows and movies and stuff, because that's a whole different can of worms that has been circulating on the internet recently. There was allegations and actually a confirmation of Secret Invasion, which is a new Marvel show. It mainly centers around Nick Fury and the Skrulls. The title sequence was made using AI.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and people weren't happy.
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the AI in general.
I obviously stand with human beings on this side of things, although I do think AI could be used as a good tool to aid, not replace people.
Yeah.
But I digress. I feel like the fact that none of these projects seemed to work together is really evident in the fact that there wasn't even an Avengers movie for Phase 4. I know we had 2 for Phase 3, so it's almost equal, I guess, averaged out, but it's just such a breach of what we know and expect about the way that the phases work that there's just not an Avengers movie. And I know they were setting up a lot of stuff, but they didn't even set things up very well because of the fact that the things don't, go together very well, the different projects, the TV shows.
What did they end Phase 5 with? Or was it 4?
I honestly don't remember what they ended Phase 4 with, although I do know that they started Phase 5 with Ant-Man Quantumania.
Okay.
Which just feels random, doesn't it?
Well, I haven't seen it, so so I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I've lost track of how many phases we're in.
It's 5.
Yeah, I guess it's 5.
And none of this is like to say anything about the quality of the ones we haven't watched. I heard that Secret Invasion wasn't very good. She-Hulk, definitely not.
Oh, we saw Moon Knight.
Oh, yeah.
We forgot about that. We liked that.
I did like Moon Knight. I like Moon Knight because it wasn't pretending or trying in any way to be connected to the rest of the MCU, which, considering how messed up everything else in the MCU is right now, is kind of a blessing for Moon Knight.
Khonshu was cool.
Khonshu was cool. I like Mark's whole thing with the DID. It was very interesting. I think it was maybe a little overlong and overcomplicated toward the latter half, but it worked all right for the most part.
We totally covered a whole video on Moon Knight, and I totally forgot.
If you haven't seen our Moon Knight review, you can click the link to it in the description below.
The last few years have just kind of melded together in a big mushy ball.
Yeah, we had a big hiatus, and anything we posted before the hiatus, don't ask us to remember it.
We're different now. We're a
Different
new
people.
person. But go on.
Aside from Moon Knight, I had a good point in that I feel like I was noticing sort of the cracks in the quality of the shows relatively quickly, because there was WandaVision and then there was Loki, and those were pretty good, especially WandaVision, and Loki was interesting at the very least. And then there was Captain. Nope, not Captain. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You feel like there should be Captain America in there somewhere because it's essentially about Captain America's legacy, but there's not, and it's confusing. And then like they also have the end title say Captain America and the Winter Soldier because Sam becomes the new Captain America. It was just okay, and it was very long and drawn out, and it's hard for me to pinpoint what exactly I disliked about it, aside from the fact that it really didn't do much to further the MCU in any way. And I know I was just praising Moon Knight for that, but that's because it was interesting in and of itself.
And this
Falcon
wasn't.
Yeah, Falcon and the Winter Soldier feels like it was trying to be important in its own way to the overall MCU because, like, objectively, there was an interesting development in that Falcon became the new Captain America. It just doesn't end up feeling like anything by the time you're done watching the series, though, and especially because I don't think that Falcon / Captain America now and Bucky, Winter Soldier, have been in anything since. And I know that obviously they're going to bring them back, probably in the next Avengers, but there was a feeling in the first 3 phases of Marvel, in my opinion, that like everything was a lot more interconnected and actually made a lot more sense when you thought about the connections.
They were also simpler. It was like easier to follow along. It was harder to fuck up. And now you have an inclusion of not just a ton of characters, but now and it's funny because like they could have messed it up earlier with all the different stories like weaving together, but now you also have, the multiverse and all that mess, and so now it's especially a big ball of mush.
Yeah, and okay, now I'm going to start ranting about the multiverse because even though I've already talked about like why their world building in terms of the multiverse is not great, it gets even worse because personally speaking, and I know that this is not a popular opinion, the multiverse is a bad idea for 99% of movies. There are a select few number of movies that can do it halfway decently. Everything Everywhere All at Once and Across the Spider-Verse / Into the Spider-Verse / Beyond the Spider-Verse. I just don't think that, especially with something that's already as big as it is like the MCU, I don't think that the multiverse should have ever been considered. And I was so mad at fans because I kept seeing everyone online saying like, oh my gosh, the multiverse is going to be so cool, there's going to be so many like alternate versions of our favorite superheroes and blah 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 blah. Like, we have so many of them already, and I know that some of them have died now, but like Chris Evans isn't going to play an alternate version of Captain America anymore. And the problem with the multiverse is that you suddenly have a scope that is so much bigger than the universe. So we started the MCU with like Earth, that's pretty simple, especially in superhero terms. Saving the world is something that superheroes do every fucking day.
Or New York.
Specifically New York. That place needs a lot of protecting. But yeah, the whole world, which feels like a big thing, right? But that's just kind of like, Tuesday for a superhero. That was small scale for the MCU, and then it got bigger with Thor. And then all of a sudden there's the realms, and granted, most of the stuff in Thor movies happened on Earth pre-Ragnarok, but, it was slowly opening up, and then there was Guardians of the Galaxy, and then it really did open up to, like, basically space as a whole. And then you get to Infinity War, and then the stakes are the entire universe. And then they're like, oh, how do you get bigger than that? Just make an infinite number of universes. Well, Infinity War was a huge deal, and Endgame was also a huge deal. So the stakes being that high made sense. And then they tried to ramp up the stakes even further and put in 1/100th of the effort in each of the shows. And it shows because it's like, oh, we have multiverse now, and it can't be internally consistent with its logic, and it's also doing the thing that happens when you have multiverse stories where you just get lost in the scope of it. You start not caring about characters because they're hardly ever established. They're used more as cameos, and then how do you feel like a character's life matters if there's an infinite number of them? That's kind of the basic way of putting the problem of scope with multiverses.
I will say that, I'm someone that is a fan of things like time travel, and like multiverse stuff is like an exciting idea to me, so like I don't want to be like a hypocrite in this video because I do find that stuff really interesting, different takes that you can go with, but I do also have noticed that the overall quality with the MCU lately has dipped, which is definitely very disappointing. And I do also agree that there comes a point, especially with like superhero movies or like sci-fi, in instances where like the world or the universe or whatever is at stake, there reaches a point where, how do you outdo the next thing? There's only so many things you can do before you've run out of all the ideas.
And it's also like, yeah, and it's just like too big to comprehend after a certain point. It's like it's so ridiculous to imagine an infinite number of universes that your brain just kind of gives up, and it's just like, well, this is silly.
Maybe that's why I loved WandaVision so much, especially, before like the main finale, because I was like, I just like that this is about what's going on in her head. Like that was nice and simple.
WandaVision should have been, if not, WandaVision should have been, aside from like that third act where they have the big battle, the template for what a Marvel TV show should have been, which is an intimate, small-scale character study of all of the characters that haven't had enough character development of their own up to that point. I was looking forward to Falcon and the Winter Soldier because I felt like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam and Bucky, were always, sidekicks to Captain America. They were always like second fiddle. Even in Civil War, where Bucky's probably the most important character, he's still kind of being saved by Captain America a lot of the time. And you can't really see him by himself as he's struggling with all his Winter Soldier things.
He's more of a plot device.
Yeah. And in an ideal world, that show would have been a lot more about his struggles with that instead of that multinational thing. It's been a while since I've seen it, and I honestly kind of don't care to remember it, so I don't remember all the details. Forgive me.
They did focus on like Bucky was going to therapy and stuff like that.
Just enough, but like not as much as I would have wanted.
I'm kind of weird, and I'm someone that grew up reading and writing fan fiction, if you know me, and so like I would have been happy just watching them live like normal lives, like going to the grocery store and like boring shit, and just watching them like they're a fish in a tank, like wow, look at them.
Well, that would have been good. Like I said, they should have been smaller scale character studies, because the stakes were so high, they kind of needed a reset, and it kind of felt like they were doing that with WandaVision until the big third act CGI thing. Big battle with a witch, whatever.
You were also kind of getting that with Loki also, because it was more focused on him and his growth, which was another like
Loki
nice thing.
Isn't the perfect example though, because it
No,
was the one that introduced the multiverse, and it
know.
also introduced a lot of time travel shenanigans and the existence of the TVA and a lot of stuff that's really high concept. So not
I'm
the
just saying,
perfect
like the thing
example.
that interested me most was like
Loki's character.
Yeah, well, I like seeing characters grow, and I like psychoanalyzing people. I'm a psych major over here and working in the behavioral health field, so I like to, study people like that. So those were my favorite bits.
I've essentially said everything I wanted to say. This was real scattershot. That's how a rant is. I'm not sorry. I've been Michael.
And I've been Deanna. And eventually, sooner or later, you get to listen to me rip into Thor, or, what they've done with him as of lately. Bye.
Bye.